January 28, 1986. 11:38 a.m., Cape Canaveral, Florida. A school teacher is strapped into a rocket. Millions of kids are watching live from their classrooms. 73 seconds later, the shuttle disintegrates at 46,000 feet. 7 people dead. The whole country saw it happen in real time. NASA called it a tragedy, an accident, an unforeseen malfunction. That was the lie. Because the night before, an engineer named Roger Boy Jolly sat in a conference room in Utah, slamming his fist on the table, begging them not to launch. He had the data. He had the proof. He predicted exactly how those 7 people would die. And they launched anyway. This is the story of the man who tried to stop the Challenger disaster, and what happened to him after he was proven right. Let's start with the murder weapon. It wasn't a crack in the fuselage. It wasn't a computer failure. It was a rubber ring, an O-ring. 2 of them, actually. Picture a giant rubber band, about 12 feet in diameter, seated in a groove between 2 segments of the solid rocket booster. Their job? Seal the joint so 5,000-degree combustion gas doesn't escape sideways. That's it. 2 rubber rings standing between 7 astronauts and a fireball. And here's the critical detail. Rubber gets stiff when it's cold. You know this. Leave a rubber band in the freezer overnight, snap it, and it breaks like glass. Now scale that up to a rocket. Roger Boy Jolly knew this better than anyone on the planet. He was Morton Thiokol's top seal specialist, maybe the leading expert on O-rings and rocket joint seals in the entire country. And by 1985, he was terrified. Let's rewind to January 1985, a full year before the disaster. A shuttle launched in 50-degree weather, the coldest launch to date. When the boosters were recovered from the ocean, Boisjoli examined them. What he found made his blood run cold. The primary O-ring had been breached. Hot gas had blown past it. The grease between the 2 rings was blackened like coal. The backup ring, the only thing between the crew and death, had held. Barely. 1 ring away from catastrophe. Boisjoli didn't stay quiet. He wrote a memo. July 31st, 1985. Subject line: O-ring erosion, potential failure criticality. He sent it straight to the Vice President of Engineering. In it, he laid out exactly what would happen. He warned the result would be, and I'm paraphrasing here, a catastrophe of the highest order, involving loss of human life. 6 months before Challenger, he used almost those exact words. He wasn't guessing. He wasn't speculating. He was reading data. The response? Thiokol management formed a task force. Sounds good, right? Within a month, Boisjoli realized the task force was a ghost. No budget, no staff, no authority, no management support. He wrote another memo in October, saying even NASA could see the team was being blocked. He was screaming into a bureaucracy that had already decided the shuttle was safe enough. Now we get to the night that changed everything. January 27th, 1986, the evening before launch. A teleconference between Morton Thiokol engineers in Utah, NASA managers at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and officials at Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama. The forecast for launch morning? 28 degrees Fahrenheit. That's below freezing. The coldest any shuttle had ever launched in was 53 degrees. They were about to attempt to launch 25 degrees colder than anything they'd ever tried, in a system where a 50-degree launch had already nearly failed. Boisjoli and his fellow engineers presented their data. Their recommendation was unambiguous. Do not launch below 53 degrees. The O-rings lose their ability to seal. Thiokol management initially backed their engineers. They formally recommended a launch delay. Then NASA pushed back. George Hardy, a deputy director at Marshall, said he was appalled by the recommendation. Lawrence Malloy, the solid rocket booster project manager, said something to the effect of, My God, Theokol, when do you want me to launch next April? Remember, a school teacher was on this flight. The president was going to mention the launch in his State of the Union address that night. There was political pressure coming from every direction. Theokol asked for a 5-minute offline caucus. It lasted 30 minutes. During that caucus, Boisjoli and fellow engineer Arnie Thompson made their final stand. They spread photographs of the damaged O-rings on the table. They pleaded. 4 senior Theokol managers then held a private vote. 3 voted to launch. The 4th, Bob Lund, the VP of Engineering, the same man who received Boisjoli's warning memo 6 months earlier, he hesitated. Then came the words that sealed 7 fates. Jerry Mason, the senior VP, looked at Lund and told him to take off his engineering hat and put on his management hat. Lund changed his vote. Launch approved. Boisjoli and the other engineers didn't get a vote. They sat there in silence. One of them, the data still spread across the table, could do nothing but watch. The next morning, January 28th, the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center is covered in ice. Icicles hang from the service structure. The temperature at launch time is 36 degrees at the pad. But on the shaded side of the right solid rocket booster, where the critical joint sits, instruments recorded 28 degrees, maybe lower. Roger Boisjoli watched from a conference room in Utah. He later said he and his colleagues believed that if the seals failed, the shuttle would never get off the launch pad. So, when Challenger cleared the tower, they felt a wave of relief. That relief lasted 73 seconds. Here's what happened in those 73 seconds, mechanically. At ignition, the solid rocket boosters lit up with 5,000 degree gas. The right booster's aft field joint flexed open. The frozen O-rings, stiff as hard plastic, couldn't expand fast enough to seal the gap. Hot gas blew past both rings instantly. At first, the leak was temporarily sealed by aluminum oxide deposits. Essentially burned residue clogged the gap. For about 57 seconds, this accidental plug held. Then, at about 58 seconds, aerodynamic forces and wind shear broke that fragile seal wide open. A plume of flame erupted from the side of the booster. It was visible in the launch footage, a flicker that grew into a blowtorch aimed directly at the external fuel tank. At 72 seconds, the flame burned through the strut connecting the booster to the tank. At 73 seconds, the rear dome of the external tank failed. Liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen mixed. The tank ruptured. The shuttle stack was engulfed in a fireball of vaporized fuel. The orbiter, suddenly exposed to aerodynamic forces it was never designed to handle at nearly twice the speed of sound, was ripped apart. And here's the detail that haunts people the most. The crew cabin separated intact. It didn't explode. It kept rising, climbing to about 65,000 feet before arcing back down toward the Atlantic. Analysis showed that at least 3 crew members activated their personal emergency air packs. They were conscious. The cabin fell for 2 minutes and 45 seconds before it hit the ocean at 207 miles per hour. The impact force was 200 Gs. No one could survive that. Pilot Michael Smith's last recorded words were just 2 syllables, an exclamation caught on the intercom. After that, silence. Now, the aftermath. President Reagan formed the Rogers Commission, Neil Armstrong, Sally Ride, and a Nobel Prize-winning physicist named Richard Feynman, who was about to become NASA's worst nightmare. Feynman didn't follow the script. While the commission held formal hearings, he went straight to the engineers on the ground. He talked to the people who actually built the rockets, and they told him everything. NASA officials estimated the chance of shuttle failure at 1 in 100,000. Feynman found the real number was closer to 1 in 100, 1,000 times worse than advertised. Then came the moment everyone remembers, a televised hearing. Feynman had a C-clamp from a hardware store and a glass of ice water from the serving staff. he pulled a piece of O-ring rubber from a scale model of the shuttle, compressed it in the clamp, and dropped it in the ice water. When he pulled it out, the rubber didn't bounce back. It just sat there, deformed, stiff, dead. He told the room and the cameras that the material showed no resilience at 32 degrees. The whole country understood in an instant what Boisjoli had been trying to explain for over a year. But here's the thing most people don't know. That moment wasn't really Feynman's discovery. It was Sally Ride's. She had quietly found the suppressed test data showing O-ring failure at low temperatures. She slipped a document to fellow Commissioner General Donald Kutyna during a walk, looked straight ahead, handed it off with her left hand, didn't say a word. Kutyna passed the lead to Feynman. Feynman turned it into theatre. Kutyna kept Ride's secret until after she died in 2012. As for Roger Boisjoli, the man who got it right, he testified before the commission. He called the decision-making process unethical. He brought his documentation, every note, every memo from 7 years of warnings. After his testimony, Sally Ride walked up to him and gave him a hug. She was the only one. When he went back to Morton Thiokol, they reassigned him off all space work. Colleagues shunned him. Neighbors avoided him. One co-worker warned him that if he kept talking, it would be bad for him. He was treated, as one fellow engineer wrote, as if he'd committed a crime, not prevented one. Boisjoli eventually resigned. He took 14 boxes of documentation with him. He suffered from depression, insomnia, severe headaches, post-traumatic stress from a disaster he tried to stop. But he didn't disappear. He spent the rest of his life giving over 300 lectures on engineering ethics at universities and companies. He became the textbook example, literally, of what happens when management overrides engineering. Every engineering student in America learns his name. Feynman, who had less than 2 years to live himself, wrote an appendix to the commission report that NASA tried to bury. His closing line is carved into the history of spaceflight. For a successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled. Roger Boisjoli died on January 6, 2012. He was 73 years old. The same number of seconds it took for everything he warned about to come true. The Challenger 7 never had a chance. Not because the engineering failed, because the people who could have stopped it chose not to listen. End of briefing.